So it's that time of year. It's tax season, and it sucks. But the thing about tax season is that it sucks way more than it needs to, and a big part of why that is because of TurboTax. Most of you are familiar with TurboTax, the tax filing software that tricks tax-paying Americans into paying for a service that should be free. Well, amid reignited efforts to provide those same tax-paying Americans with free government-run tax filing via the IRS, the TurboTax parent company, Intuit, is lobbying against it. And it should be free. We already have to pay taxes because our government insists that we do. And we do it for the most part. We don't like it, but we do it. Why should we be charged fees by a private corporation to do something that our government has mandated? Our own Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen believes as much. She said, quote, "There is no reason in the world that a modern economy shouldn't have a system that makes it easy for such a large group of taxpayers to file their returns." On top of that, well, you've probably already been seeing memes floating around about how the IRS makes you guess how much money you owe them. But if you guess wrong, maybe they'll throw you in jail. It's a really fun game that we play. It doesn't need to be that way, though. In fact, a 2022 study by the Department of the Treasury's Office of Tax Analysis estimated that approximately 73 million Americans would be okay with filing tax returns based on pre-populated data that the IRS already has. No more guessing games. Other nations similar to ours have free filing options available to their citizens. There's no real reason that we shouldn't too. Of course, according to Intuit, similar government-run tax filing systems would be impossible to implement here in the US because the American tax code is just way more complicated than anything those other countries have going on. Our government couldn't possibly handle it. And by the way, that's a common argument that we hear against why the US can't have the things our contemporaries have, like healthcare or sensible gun laws. We're just too different over here. It wouldn't work here. But back to the point, TurboTax has been around for a while, which has given them the time and expertise to fine-tune their software. Anything our government puts out would have to be comparable to TurboTax's much more robust and experienced system, or else people might lose faith in the government-run system. We all remember the bungled rollout of healthcare.gov, and we remember the less than perfect distribution of stimulus checks during the pandemic. And people aren't very forgiving when it comes to things like that. So to say the IRS has a branding issue is an understatement, and Intuit is literally capitalizing on that bad image. Now, with a federal government that's keen on funding the IRS and getting free filing options to everyday Americans, Intuit is spending more money than ever on lobbying fees. Senator Elizabeth Warren said, quote, "Intuit spends millions on lobbying and deploys hordes of influence peddlers on Washington to try and stop free online tax filing because they're terrified that the billions in profits they make by scamming taxpayers are at risk." And they do be making billions. I mentioned earlier that TurboTax tricks people into paying more than they need to in fees while paying their taxes. I meant that literally. Last year, the Federal Trade Commission sued Intuit in federal court over deceptive marketing practices. That is, Intuit was advertising free tax filing while deliberately hiding the free portal. The company employed tactics such as putting the free portal on completely separate landing pages using different names, coding the free portal in such a way that it was hidden from Google search results, and targeting military service members, people with disabilities, unemployed Americans, and people with student loans. The result was that many people who would have qualified for free filing were charged large fees that they shouldn't have been made to pay. But there's another component to this story, and it's a common theme we see in the public versus private debate. The theme is that the government can't possibly do anything as well as the private industry can, so we should just let the private industry do everything, even if that means people have to pay fees for these services while still paying taxes to the government that's supposed to be providing these services. A big part of why this happens is because of marketing and lobbying. Private companies spend money on marketing and lobbying to convince both lawmakers and everyday citizens that they can do this particular thing better than the government can, more efficiently, with more innovation, with more robust platforms, because they have teams of the most talented and dedicated engineers and employees, and because they're only focused on the one thing. Their attention isn't split between multiple responsibilities. In theory, by outsourcing some of the government's work to the private industry, the government can better focus its energy and resources on its remaining agenda. However, these companies also have the task of convincing the public that they should be paying a private company for a service that the government could and should be offering them for free. That usually involves demonizing the government agency, and with the successful lobbying of political figures, it oftentimes involves defunding the government agency so that it literally can't function properly. We see this in healthcare, we're seeing this now in education, and we see it with the IRS. I mentioned earlier that the IRS has a branding problem. It's easy to hate on the IRS. It's a glorified debt collection agency that makes everyone's lives more difficult than they already are, judging us for not saving every receipt from the past year when the IRS can barely do its own job. No one likes the IRS, but to be completely fair, it's not really its fault that it can't do its job. It's been getting defunded since the 1980s. As a result, the IRS doesn't have the resources to build a robust tax-paying platform that's available to the public, nor does it have the resources to audit the wealthy. Just this year, as soon as the Republicans took back the House after the 2022 midterms, they voted to cut IRS funding again, essentially seeking to undo the $80 billion budget increase the Biden administration gave it. This is bad because according to a piece from Brookings, quote, "A well-funded IRS can distribute emergency aid quickly, serve taxpayers efficiently, and help ensure that millionaires have to follow the tax laws just like everyone else. It's an essential investment in good government." But the corporations and the wealthy don't want a well-funded IRS. An IRS that's hanging by a thread is too busy juggling basic operations to, say, audit millionaire and billionaire filers. Currently, the tax gap, or the unpaid amount owed in taxes, is at nearly $7 trillion, 60% of which comes from underreporting income earned by the top 10% of taxpayers, and more than 25% come from the top 1%. So we're up against a lot, but at least we have some champions in our government that are looking out for us this time. All right, that is it for me. If you got anything out of this, please like and subscribe. Be sure to follow me on Instagram and TikTok, and have a lovely tax season. Thank you.